know if you can hear my neighbor. My neighbor is snoring, and I feel like I don't want to wake him, but I also feel like his wife would probably thank me for it. I shouldn't get in the middle of two, three, four. Ba da ba 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 ba. Ra da ba boo ba beep boo. Beep beep boop ba 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 ba. It's Hey, a special Wednesday edition of Wednesday. I'm in Picks of the Week. But I really am now trying to keep my voice down. I'm sure you'll thank me for that later also. So, uh, excuse me. I'm going to be in Long Beach again this weekend. So instead of working the shop tomorrow, I work today. I got my funny books. I didn't get to get all of them today because I've been kind of on the broke side. And also, I got shorted a ton. Like, there was a couple books that I'll discuss here that a lot of people didn't get, but there was a few more that I was supposed to get this week. And now that there are no fewer than three distributors instead of just the one, everything's a whole mess. So that fits right in with my plan. First up, I got Black Panther #3, or if you go by the legacy numbering, 200. This is Marvel's brilliant way of having their cake and eating it too, as far as the numbering goes. I mean, if I think I've talked about that a million times, so I'm not going to bother now. Now, not only is this an oversized anniversary issue, um, apparently there is a first appearance of a new character in here, and so the speculation market, which I have not paid any attention to since the last time I worked in a comic book store, is all abuzz. So these ran out right away at the shop, but since I actually read Black Panther and I'm not just trying to flip a book, take a $6 book and sell it for $20 at the most. Hooray! I mean, if you can get some sucker to pay $100 for something like that, but whatever. That's the thing about speculator market, and it only seems to be getting more and more true. Is that every time they announce a character is going to be in a movie or a television program, that character's first appearance skyrockets, and depending on the popularity, doesn't usually stay there. Like I think the first appearance of Agatha Harkness, which is it's a Fantastic Four. I want to say '96, which was worth $14 a couple years ago, is now going for like 400. And since WandaVision was such a huge show, that's still kind of the case. But stuff like I can't think of any now, but there's been a couple where I was like, oh, this is the first appearance of this character that I know was just in a show or movie, and then it's already back down to not being worth anything. Speculation is such a minor aspect of comic book collecting to me, and it's a lot of people's main primary, so I don't get it. Speaking of which, also this week, Thor number 21, which was also uh, rather coveted around the shop today. This features the first full appearance of Mjolnir, which is Thor's hammer, but Thor's hammer back when Jane Foster was Thor, I want to say about 5 years ago, her hammer or Thor's hammer started taking on, it was hers, started taking on kind of a life of its own. Like it wasn't talking or communicating with anyone, but it was clearly that it's part of its magic was that it actually had consciousness. And in Donny Cates's current run of Thor, which essentially consists of throwing every past ally or in this case tool weapon against Thor. So we had Don Blake come back out of purgatory essentially, win a little cuckoo birds and mess some things up. Now we got Mjolnir doing the same thing, and The final issue, or the previous issue, number 20, the final page, we see Mjolnir in human form for the first time. And so that people, oh, that's a first appearance. Never mind that the hammer has been around since Journey into Mystery number 87 or what. Is it 83? One of those. 89. And also now they're clamoring after this because this is something, this has always been kind of a gray area. Always. Incredible Hulk number 181 is from the mid 70s. Is considered the first appearance of Wolverine, but technically in Incredible Hulk number 180, it's the final panel. Is here comes the Wolverine. But as long as I've been, collecting comics, 181 has always been the first one. Gambit shows up in Uncanny X-Men Annual number 14, and that's worth some money. But Uncanny X-Men number 266, I believe, is his first full appearance, and then a lot of people consider that to be the full. So I don't know how that's going to break down with this. I can tell you that it's going to matter even less than it sounds, because I mean, even like Donny Cates, speaking of which, created the Cosmic Ghost Rider a few years ago. I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, and the first appearance of that character is really sought after and clamored for. And now I don't know that it is. I'm frankly surprised they haven't used Cosmic Ghost Rider. And if they never use Cosmic Ghost Rider in the MCU, I will be surprised. But again, I bought it because it was in the Thanos series that I was reading because Donny Cates was writing it. So whenever I get books like these, it's not because they're going to be worth something. It's because I want to read them. Does that make me better than everyone else? Obviously, but I'm broker than everyone else too. So there's also that. That was picks of the week, now picks of last week. So I got a lot of reading in last week, and Aerosmith number one. None of these were really. I mean, they're all good. I mean, I never regret spending time reading comic books. Yeah, this is fun. It makes me want to just go back and get the trade for the first one, but I don't need any more trades right now. Nothing else is really sunk in. It pretty much, I mean, Buziak is well aware that nobody's read this comic in 15 years, and it's not. I mean, I'm sure it has its diehards, but it's not a book that people were clamoring for more of. So a lot of this is kind of just, reintroducing characters and sort of resetting the story. And honest, like I said last week, I'd read the very first issue. I don't remember any of this stuff, but it's good. I'm looking forward to it. I always like Buziak. She-Hulk number one. This wasn't as good as I had thought it would be. It was a lot of sort of resetting the table, like new creative team, new series. Jen hasn't had her own series in a couple years, and that the last couple She-Hulk solo series have been kind of different. that was the word I was reaching for. Have been a little off the beaten path. I can't have no words. I'm a half hour late getting home because of the bus, but I'm also exhausted. The last She-Hulk series was just called Hulk, and she was more of a rageful, like Incredible Hulk, as opposed to the fun fourth wall breaking gal about town that she was. The last time I remember that a series like that was in 2015, which was really good. Yeah, 2014 maybe. This actually did start off. It starts off with a big old fight between her and Titania, and I'm never gonna complain about that. And then a lot more kind of resetting, like so we all know where Jennifer Walters is, and then surprise character walks in at the end, and I'm not going to ruin that quite yet. It's very, I mean, I also, as much as I enjoyed Rainbow Rowell's run on Runaways, which only ended just recently, there was a point where I did get kind of bored with it enough to where I stopped buying it for a few months. But knowing that going in, that sometimes Rowell's going to take her time getting to the good stuff, I'm fine with that. I'll wait for that. And also, X Lives of Wolverine #1. I loved this book. Wasn't It didn't answer quite as many questions as to what the hell is actually going on. And unfortunately, X Deaths of Wolverine #1 was supposed to come out this week, but did not. So Logan is on a mission through time, and nothing has really been revealed as to why exactly. But in his first adventure, he goes back to prevent Omega Red from killing baby Charles Xavier. That can't hurt. Um, but yeah, and then he ends up in another. So like, I guess this is kind of what the solicits were driving at. He's being kind of yanked through time and into different eras that he's lived through, but he doesn't know. He doesn't have any control over it and doesn't know why exactly. He's kind of trying to find his way home now. I'm really bummed that the second part didn't come out today, but what are you gonna do? Did I get any Cerebus read this week? You better believe it. I got 2 more phone books, Flight and Women. This is the first half of Mothers and Daughters. He went for Mothers and Daughters. He made it into 4 skinnier trades, phone books. I don't know why. I kind of would have preferred 2 bigger ones like Church and State was, but and now we're at the point too where full on sexist. It's not. That's okay. So as I've mentioned before, or I hope I haven't mentioned this before, but on this read through of Cerebus, I am reading it in its own context for the very, very first time. Every other time I'd read Cerebus before was when it was coming out monthly, and so there was always a bunch. And Cerebus was famous for its letters page, Aardvark comment, because people would write in. It was uh, a real precursor to message boards, which a lot of comic book letters pages were, but this Cerebus is more than any. And also, Dave would have editorials pretty much every issue. He has, in these phone books, he usually writes a little intro thing, and at the beginning of Women, he's kind of making it clear that he doesn't believe in feminism as he understands it. And I don't think his understanding of feminism is completely off the mark. I do think his reaction to it is pretty off the mark, but that's because I'm older and wiser, not than him. And although I guess I am probably older than he was when he wrote this. Oh boy. So, and then like there was always a lot of arguing and back and forth on the letters pages, and a lot of, I'm sure these guys all felt very deep discussions about feminism and rape and all this other stuff. But in the story itself, it's still kind of separate from that. And I know for a fact that it does not stay that way. By the end of the title, by the end of the series, he's not pretending to be Dave Sim anymore. He's not, he's talking directly through Cerebus. And most of Latter Days, which is the final arc of Cerebus, is Cerebus reading the Bible and interpreting it. And it's even more boring than it sounds from what I remember. I'm still very interested in that sort of thing. I've read the Bible, pretty much the whole thing. Skipped over some of the preachy parts. Actually, I think I just skipped over the begats mostly, but I'm rather well educated on that. So I'm looking forward to reading that now, having that in my vocabulary. But overall, still what this arc is about, it's about fascist matriarchal society versus a more progressive feminist society, and Cerebus is caught in the middle. And now that it is certainly there to be interpreted that Dave is definitely taking the Cerebus's side. He's putting Cerebus forward as the hero again, because he was not the hero all through Church and State at all. And it feels like after Jaka's story and the blowback he got from that, I'm speculating here completely, speaking of which. Um, and also, the guy had gone through a pretty rough divorce, I guess, and I think he'd also gone, when he was doing Jaka's story, he'd gone through another bad breakup or something. And I can tell you from experience that that's usually where these sorts of things come from. Anytime you're reading about some male author who's, claiming feminism to be false or uh, anti-male, or you know a lot of slippery slope, a lot of like, well, next thing you know, they're going to be telling you who can have children and who can't. Now, in this story, it's like the matriarchal society is like, oh, you're like, oh no, this is not good. And that's represented by Siren and the Sirenists, and then on the other side you have Astoria and the Kevalists. And Astoria is a character that we know very well at this point because she was one of the major characters in High Society and also in Church and State, even though she doesn't appear in it very often. And certainly by Flight, she's back into being. No, Church and State, well, she gets raped in Church and State, and that's by Cerebus, and that's where it's like, all right. I mean, technically they were married, but that's ask John Wayne Bobbitt about that. So I mean, I'm reading it now, and I tend to side with Astoria because Cerebus isn't really doing anything but drinking and then getting violent, which. So it's like Dave is all, and again, I could be wrong in my interpretation, but Dave's putting Cerebus forth as the rational answer to all this. But then one of his major acts in this arc is to belch really loud. So, and that actually does cause the story to move forward, believe it or not. So this is, I think, what I'm trying to get at is that I'm not defending Dave yet, or at all, but I don't feel like I have to yet either. I don't think he's gone completely around the bend yet. At the time, people definitely considered him to have gone around the bend, but I'm like, knowing what I know, it's like, yeah, if I could go back to 1993 and tell people who are angry about Cerebus, like, you might want to hold on to some of that rage because it's gonna get much worse. Still one of my favorite comics of all time. I also read this Madman Volume 1 by Michael Allred. Michael Allred has been one of my favorite comic book artists for years. He has a very distinctive style. But oddly enough, Madman, which is his creator-owned main character, the one he's most well known for, I've never really read a lot of it. So this has the first 3-issue series. And the first series is it's good, but it's still very rough. But by the end of the second 3-issue series, it's definitely like it's already all red. Of course, this also, it helps that his lovely wife Laura was doing the colors, because I do that myself. I often I rave about Michael Allred, but Laura Allred has been coloring him for the last 30 years. And I don't know. I mean, I want to say, have I ever seen anybody else color? So I don't think so. I really also enjoy Mike Allred because he's a bit of not an eccentric, I don't want to say, but he's apparently a devout Mormon, and he even has been very, very slowly working on a comic book adaptation of the Book of Mormon, which I would buy in a heartbeat. I really wish he would finish it. Uh, he works at his own pace, but he's sought after enough that he still will get like a monthly Marvel book every now and again. Him and Peter Milligan are bringing back their X book called Ecstatics, but this time it's going to be called The Excellent. So I'm really looking forward to that too. But it's great stuff. And this is also I never had really understood. I didn't really know because I never really read Madman. But Madman, speaking of Cerebus, kind of there was. It's weird that I'm only just now kind of thinking of this, but I guess because I've been reading a lot of comics from when I was in high school. Uh, the Tick is probably the most famous example of this, but there was a huge there was a surge, especially in the independent small press in the 80s and 90s, late 80s, early 90s, of superhero parodies. Superhero comics were getting more and more ridiculous. I mean, they had been pretty ridiculous for a while, but you were starting to see a backlash to that in the underground. I don't think like that doesn't really come up anymore because the alternative press, such as it is, doesn't even acknowledge that superhero comics exist. The industry used to be so small, though, that you couldn't do comics without being surrounded by superheroes. Now, you could very feasibly, and I think people do, run comic book stores that don't carry any superhero comics at all. They're not very common, but yeah, they do exist. And they have, like, I remember when I was a kid, people would try to get that off the ground and it never really worked out. There was one in San Diego, which, you know, didn't last, unfortunately. But it was also unfortunate because you had to be 18 to enter, and I was still in high school when it was open. I digress. But yeah, Madman is another sort of superhero parody where the main character is an insane idiot. So you have the Tick, you have the Flaming Carrot. Cerebus is not an idiot, but it's definitely the cockroach character is an idiot, and he's the one that's like the parody. So he was the cockroach was like a Batman parody. I went down this list before, but then he was also Moon Roach. He's Punisher Roach. He's um, Normal Roach, based off Normal Man. He was Captain Cockroach off Captain America. So that was like a big thing, and I don't. That just doesn't seem to. You occasionally get silly superhero books or goofy, like kind of parody ones, but it seemed like it was much more prevalent back in the 80s and 90s. And I think once the boys, in fact, the boys is kind of like the ultimate of that, brought to its most disgusting, darkest conclusion. And it's really good, but I don't think anybody really needs to make fun of superheroes anymore. I also just think the industry doesn't give a shit. There's guys like me who buy a lot of superhero comics. I don't know that. Well, you know what? Now I'm going to get off on a thing, and I don't give a shit. All right, I got to go make a sandwich because I'm starving. This picks up last week. And I will see you back here next time. Okay? Okay. Okay.